Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. And you know what? This is one that I'm pretty darn excited to bring to you. There's been a fair amount of, iffy discussion around classes, all the Covenant ability stuff. I think that's fair to say. But there is one thing that a lot of us have been very excited about, especially since the acquisition is really good. Way better than Legion for sure. And that is Legendaries. A whole bunch of them are on the beta. We've spent a whole bunch of time testing them, and today we're going to bring you sort of the best, some of the worst or more iffy ones, and then also a bunch of returning favorites from Legion. And seriously, this is, for the most part, actually stuff that makes me feel excited to test out different specs and different characters in this expansion. So you know what? If you play just about anything, I think you're going to find today's video real interesting. Now, of course, if you want to support things like the creation of today's video, we're even hiring soon, and you might notice over the next few weeks, we're doing things to actually get more content out to you, especially on like beta gameplay things. Well, if you want to support that, Patreon. Over there this month, you will get the Warlock class pin. You will get the Tyrannog art set, where art that's got some fun lore on the back. If you don't know what Tyrannog is, it's kind of what the Mists of Tyrannosaith dungeon and parts of Ardenweald are based off, and that is Irish mythology. So we've done something up for that, and of course the gorgeous sort of gnomish inspired bit of Ratchet and Clank as well in their art pack too. So that super helps us out. It really is appreciated, and I really hope that you get to see the improvements made possible by that over the coming weeks and months. So with that said, let's just get stuck into the video. All right, we're going to kick it off with the best. And remember, what we call here the best is not necessarily the strongest, but it's the stuff that actually changes up gameplay, that's interesting, fun to use. Essentially, right, the stuff that I think we, and hopefully you, are going to be excited to play with, excited to acquire, stuff you're going to want to hunt down in this expansion. First up on our list of the greatest hits, we've got Firestorm for the Fire Mages. Now, this gives each hot streak a small chance to proc Firestorm, which is 5 seconds of instant and guaranteed crit pyroblasts and flame strikes. Yeah, that's kind of as crazy as it sounds. So yes, it is super RNG, but it is really satisfying when it actually happens, add in a massive, obnoxious weak aura with a Ragnaros soundbite, and I think you're going to have some absolute wild times going around in PvP or world content, just having these crazy times of rolling out those crits, which for the pace of a fire mage is just going to feel awesome. Then next up, and sticking with the Fire Mages, we've got Sun King's Blessing, and this one is also really cool. Man, the Fire Mages have got it great. So this is basically a more tempered version of Firestorm combined with the Pyroclasm talent. So each 6 hot streaks, right, every 6 that you get, you gain Sun King's Blessing, which will make your next non-instant Pyroblast grant you 6 seconds of combustion. That is really, trust me, it's really fun in practice. You're adding in this really cool sense of rhythm to the Fire Mage, right? You've got the sort of, your big pyro, and then bam, 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 as you're rolling through that 6 seconds of combustion that you get. And there's actually a decent bit of strategy in pulling enough Fire Blasts or Phoenix Flames to actually prepare for this window. And then, of course, the obvious overlap with Pyroclasm is pretty interesting. And, we do see that in quite a few Legendaries and Conduits, where there's, clear talent synergies, which seems kind of interesting. Sometimes it feels like mechanic reuse, but what it can do is help to make some talents more viable and really double down on and reinforce a gameplay style. And in a case like this, it's a really cool gameplay style that actually just changes up how it feels to play a Fire Mage. And really, when it comes to Legendaries, I think stuff like that is the coolest and the most exciting. Okay, enough Fire Mages, because next we've got Wrath of Consumption for the Affliction Warlocks. So, when a target with Agony dies, you gain a 5% buff to periodic damage. Now, this stacks 5 times and lasts for 12 seconds. And that can be quite fun, because chain pulling while staggering kills to make sure that it stays high is a pretty damn major buff for, playing in an intentional and a coordinated way, actually ensuring that you get the benefit of it. Now, really, this has just got a clear gameplay niche. I think it's adding a new layer of gameplay, another thing to think about. Certainly, I'll say it feels really fun in Torghast solo because of the amount of mobs, and just keeping that chain going is really fun. So I think in situations where you can actually have that match the gameplay that you're doing, it's really, really cool. And then actually also for the Affliction Warlocks, we've got Malefic Wrath. So using Malefic Rapture increases the damage of your Shadow Bolt or Drain Soul by 25% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So basically, right, you change your rotation up to try and keep this stacked up for the really big damage. And this basically fixes the kind of boring single target rotation that Affliction Warlock has, especially post changes, and it just adds in something else to think about. And this is another awesome trend that we're seeing actually. The Warlock, Mage, and Shaman, or at least from our experience in particular, have got really good legendaries that actually change up the gameplay, you know? They almost feel like a new talent or a new like big set bonus you're getting, where it's just like a new mechanic to actually pay heed to when you're playing, something new to play around. Once again, it's modifying your character in, I think, a way that's way more interesting than just, you know, flat percentage increase to some damage or something like that. So really cool. Of course, though, not all the love can go to the Affliction locks, because Destros have got another pretty cool one, Cinders of Ajikir. So, right, this one, Confurgate has a 3-second reduced cooldown and an extra charge. Now, the thing here is that Conflag, of course, is the ability that generates loads of soul shard fragments and backdraft charges. So, basically, when you've got this, it really does speed up your rotation and actually makes things really quite smooth. And all I'll say with this one is, even though it's kind of just a small increase to your resource stuff, what it results in terms of just the resultant gameplay is you've got more resources to play with, it feels really good, and man, you see those Chaos Bolts, they just keep on rolling, and it feels really exciting. So there's that, but next we've got another really cool one, Elemental Equilibrium. So this is for the Ellie Shams, and basically it means that direct fire damage increases your next Frost spells damage by 30. Frost damage increases the next Nature by 25, and Nature increases the next Fire damage by 20. So you're swapping about your elements. And you know what's pretty cool? Because this could actually force Frost Shock into the rotation in a pretty fun way. Now, it absolutely does throw off the usual flow of the rotation a bit, but sort of alternating the 3 different spell types, I think, is really quite cool. It actually keeps the elemental single target a good bit more engaging, which is something we really appreciated. And since elemental have got multiple options for fire and nature spells, they can really choose what they want to alternate or choose the right time, which I think that means this could just be quite a challenging, fun, and rewarding legendary to play with. So, pretty darn cool. So we thought that selection was just some really massive, impactful ones, but there are others that I think are less dramatic, but still super fun. There's one that I love for the Hunters that I just love to see more, and it is called Soulforge Embers. And you know what? This is just sweet. Launching a flare into your tar trap does a lot of fire damage to enemies that are in the trap. I mean, come on, that's just really cool. You trap your enemies in the tar, you light it and fire. This is just a really flavorful interaction. It just makes sense for what a hunter does, and it adds an otherwise, well, basically like a never used button with flare into your damaging rotation. Now, it's got no visuals in beta just yet, which is a little bit unfortunate, but just the very idea of this actually working, I think is really cool. And any times where we can actually get just sort of thematic use of abilities that are not commonly used in, I think that is just really cool. So, a big win in this one. The next up, we've got one for the Havoc Demon Hunters, where, well, it's called Erratic Fell Core. And honestly, it's a bit bananas because it reduces Fell Rush's cooldown to 7 seconds. And also it means that Momentum's buff lasts 6 seconds, right? So with this, you're getting almost 100% uptime on Momentum. Now, of course, even if you don't want to run Momentum, well, this one is just a whole bunch of extra movement for you. But of course, if you're going to be taking it in a DPS doing context, I think you'll obviously be doing that with Momentum as a part of a Momentum build. So I think it's pretty cool. We've got Legendary that can shape you into that Momentum build and actually make that a bit more viable. Which, I mean, not everybody likes Momentum, but I kind of like what this is doing, and certainly it's quite cool even the idea that if you didn't even want Momentum, maybe there could be a very movement-intense fight where you'd actually want to swap into this Legendary to just to make your gameplay a bit more smooth, so I think that's another really cool one. The next up, another in this same vein, is for Mistweavers, because many Mistweavers, well, they've wanted more fist weaving, right? So there's one called Ancient Techniques of the Monastery, and it makes Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, and Blackout Kick heal a nearby ally for 20% of the damage that they do. Now, that's not a lot, but the thing is that you can then combine that with your fist weaving centric talents, meaning that all of that melee DPS time as a Mistweaver monk is actually giving you more and more healing, and it just makes fist weaving a bit more viable. Now, enabling this kind of gameplay through a combination of talents and legendaries, I mean, to me it feels very very like ARPG style in its like just how it's impacting your character build, but certainly having a legendary that you can target that kind of puts the finishing touches on a build, I think that can actually be a pretty great experience. And then actually, as a quick aside on that, there's a Frost Mage legendary called Slick Ice, and it decreases the Frostbolt cast time during Icy Veins. Now, running that legendary with the Icy Veins cooldown reduction conduit, perhaps, and the sort of the longer Icy Veins talent as well, I mean, that sounds like a pretty clear example of when you can synergize all the sort of ways you can customize your character sort of towards one sort of goal or build. So I think it's pretty cool you can do that if you want. So there you go. That's, I think, a bunch of great legendaries that are really fun to play with and actually add to your gameplay quite nicely. Obviously, it's not an extensive list of the good ones. I mean, there's 36 classes in the game. Each one's got a set of legendaries. That's a lot of bloody legendaries, and we will do everything in due course, but I think for a video like this, it just makes more sense to find the coolest stuff and actually show it to you. So these are really good examples of that. But next, I'm going to look at where Blizzard have maybe went a bit wrong. Be that, say, them wasting a slot with a bit of a dud-designed legendary, or maybe setting a bad precedent for the experience of legendaries and what they actually do. Because I think legendaries should be exciting, they should be a highlight to something. What they shouldn't be is a bandage to class problems. So on that, Soothing Focus for the Mistweaver Monks, this is an interesting one because it reduces the cost and increases the potency of Enveloping Mists and Vivify when used while you're channeling Soothing Mists on your target. Now, this is something that's really being pointed out by the Mistweaver community. Like, I've only played a little bit of Mistweaver, but one of the #1 mistakes that you can make is using Soothing Mists before you do a Vivify purely to get it instant and only 1 or 2 casts, which is, like, it's mana inefficient, it's time inefficient. Why would you do it? You should just hard cast the Vivifies that you need. Basically, right, the Mistweaver community for a long time has been pointing out that Soothing Mists is a noob trap. Yes, it can be used in the right circumstances where you need a Giga Heal a tank who's getting absolutely thwacked, but outside of those instances, a lot of the time Soothing Mists is not really what you want to do. So this legendary is kind of doubling down on a noob trap, so it's kind of encouraging not really ideal behavior in terms of how the class plays, and then it's also kind of like, I think, wasting a slot because of that. So that's a good example of how not to do it. And then another one, I think, is Apex's Empowerment for the Demon Hunters. Now, this is an anima power from Torghast that made it into a legendary somehow. Now, what it does is it doubles your size, movement speed, and your melee range. Increase your movement speed and your melee range during Metamorphosis. So it just makes you big. And I mean, it's kind of cool, right? But as a legendary, I think it's really bad. There is potentially a use case in PvP, yes, but given the other Demon Hunter legendaries, like 20% chance to reset I-Beam, I think this one's a bit of a joke. Now, it could be fun to see the cool anima powers being used in other places, but I think some of them just ain't worth that much, and this is a good example. Then another one is Triune Ward for the mages, where basically, right, whenever they use a barrier, they actually get all 3 different types of barrier, but at 40% strength for each of them. Now, 40 plus 40 plus 40 is 120, and it makes it just effectively a 20% increase to their barrier power. Honestly, not worth that much. Not really that exciting. Don't know why it's there. Then Vampiric Aura for the Blood DK and Unbreakable Will for the Warriors. These make it, this is interesting, makes it so the Vampiric Blood and Shield Wall apply 50% of their effect to all party members. Now, this is not necessarily bad. It's just a interesting precedent. Some people could think it's really cool. Others maybe might think it's a bit dangerous because it's a super strong tool and it will be fun to use on like progression level content and emergencies. But you gotta wonder, is this just too strong by design? Like, I mean, the situation where you kind of have to pick what's best for your team over what's best for you in the context of the legendaries mightn't feel good in pugging, might kind of feel like people are really forced towards that, especially when it does involve, you know, creating a legendary, reserving a slot for it. Not having it could make you look and feel bad as a tank. You know, a sort of situation where it completes your legendaries and makes your tanking stronger. So I think it's a bit of an interesting one in terms of precedent. I'd love to hear what you think about this, because certainly the idea of having this sort of sharing the love with your abilities, I mean, Blizzard are more happy to let that stuff be in the game. Stuff like Power Infusion, you know, like that's another example of, you know, of this happening. So certainly do let me know what you think about where that actually is. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Then next up, well, look, I think it's fine when a legendary adds to a class, or, you know, something that's exciting, like most of our best list in this video. But when the addition of a legendary is just fixing a perceived problem in a class, I do think it's kind of frustrating, because surely fixes to classes should just be fixed on the class. Sometimes as players we wonder, right, if Blizzard see the same issues as us, and that there are some legendaries that basically fix classes kind of suggests to us that Blizzard actually do know what the issues are, but they just want to sell us the solution as a legendary. You know, we want to wear legendaries, not bandages, and the first example here is Kiss of Death for the Disc Priests. This lowers the Shadow Word Death cooldown, and it makes it work with Atonement. Now, that's kind of like one of the missing parts of Disc Priest right now, so it being a legendary is a bit rough, when actually, should it be baseline? Should it be a talent? You gotta wonder. Another is Invoker's Delight for the monks. We've been lamenting their big celestial summon cooldowns don't really impact gameplay, right? It just summons a sort of celestial dude to fight with you. So giving, we get a legendary that gives us some haste when our celestials are active. Okay. That's cool. It's a blanket solution that technically does work, but you know what? The cooldowns are boring as is. I think that this should be baseline in those cooldowns. I just don't think that this is what the role of a legendary should do. Maybe this legendary could more specifically change up what those celestials do, such that each spec has got like a new little gameplay mechanic to do while their celestial is up. I think that would be more exciting and more befitting of what I think a legendary should be, but simply just taking something that's boring and making it not boring, I mean, come on, do that baseline, not via legendary. That's my opinion. Now, that said, we've been down in the dumps for a few minutes now, haven't we? We can't have. So let's move it on. Let's go to another category, and that is returning favorites, some of the best hits, and let's just blast through them kind of quickly. So we've got Zenishi, the Spirit of Redemption, that's back and ready for all sorts of shenanigans. Temporal Warp, right? That double time warp is back just for the arcane mages. The second cast is only 15% haste now, so it's not quite as insane, but pretty cool to have. Then Exploiter, the Execute Stacking Mortal Strike damage effect from Legion, that's back for the Arms Warriors, but it is a bit weaker. Then for the Warriors, you also get Leaper, allowing 3 heroic leaps. You really can be a hoppy boy up there competing with the Vengeance DHs. Then for the Frost DKs, you're getting Consort's Cold Core, which halves the cooldown on Frostworm's Fury again, so I think people will be excited about that. Then for the Athlocks, in addition to the great new effect, you also get Sacro Lashes back for those real chunky slowing corruptions. Now it only slows for 15% now, but with, big multi-dotting with Sacro Lash and Absolute Corruption, I think that's all possible, could work quite well. So these are the most exciting Legos making it back from Legion, but there are also some old tier set bonuses and artifact traits coming back as well. And they've even made some improvements, like at Frost Mage's Cold Front. When it was the Shattered Fragments of Sindragosa in Legion, it called down Comet Storm every 15 Frost Bolts or Flurry casts, but now it's a Frozen Orb, which means it should be granting some of the Fingers of Frost charges or even the Instant Blizzards if it's talented. And I think that is a pretty cool little tweak to that people will enjoy. So really, that's most of it. The only other problem is that some of them are kind of boring, right? There's a few that just provide sort of minor benefits or ones that just aren't that exciting. And this involves stuff like cooldown reduction, sort of random resource generation or passive benefits. And some of these, they're just not that exciting, but they are pretty decent. I mean, you've got ones like, say, Monk's Celestial Breath. That's just some extra healing when using Thunder Focus Tea. There's Warrior's Seismic Reverberation, which buffs Whirlwind and Revenge in AoE. Hunter's Wildfire Cluster that just adds some damage to bombs. Warlock's Perpetual Agony that gives Athlocks 20% more shards. And some of those things, especially the resource ones, can be a little bit fun. They're just not that exciting, but I suppose they kind of exist there because a lot of players, as much as we're sitting here getting excited about these big, cool new things, there are some players who will just want a chilled out legendary that just gives them a bit of a buff, so they get that power, but they don't necessarily want to have a whole new thing in their class. So as much as these aren't super exciting, I think it's fair enough that they do exist. I suppose the only worry there is that maybe just, the boring ones are not mathematically superior. I mean, that would just be a little bit disappointing, I would say. I think that the stuff that really requires you to play around more, I think that should be better on paper, to be completely honest with you. But I'll say this, as we sort of get to the close of this video, these are already a pretty exciting part of the beta experience. Playing around with them has been fun. They have got our team excited. And that really is nice. And there are sure to be plenty of synergies to be found between, these, the conduits, the talents. And I mean, look, even other things like getting the recipes. you know, you get the recipes. The recipes are account-wide, and that should make it a way, way less frustrating, you know, than, say, the Legion version, right? Where it was just pure randomness. It's going to be so much better. And having to engage with crafters to, you know, upgrade your pieces, to build out your pieces, to get the base ones, I think that'll, like, foster a nice level of attachment with your legendaries, because you've kind of been involved in the whole process. And also, it makes the profession game a little bit more sort of robust as well. So there you go. Look, hopefully it's not too much effort to just keep a few of these up across the specs. I mean, I'd certainly say that, you know, as time goes on and maybe Blizzard will let you have 2 legendaries at your character at once, you could start to be stacking up some really cool stuff. And one potential problem there is you could just have 2 that would sort of, you know, interact in a really degenerate way and break a class. Well, Blizzard have already started making some effects actually be specific to certain slots, and that's actually pretty handy because it gives Blizzard a bit of a balancing tool in the future that should allow them creative freedom in adding loads of new ones while kind of cutting themselves off from sort of accidentally sneaking in, you know, 2 legendary effects that just break a spec because they're so powerful. It means that, yeah, there could be chances where those 2 legendary effects are both independently really cool, together would be broken, so by allowing them to be mutually exclusive through the slot restriction, it means Blizzard could still do both. I think that's pretty good for the base health of this system. So overall, there you go. You know what? Yeah, we've had some videos on the channel recently talking about the Covenant abilities. We're a bit worried about that, so it's really nice to actually get a video like this that's nice and happy and excited about you know, some just gameplay for Shadowlands. So pretty cool. I'd love to know though, what do you think? What do you think's exciting? Is anything really just rang out to you as you've watched this video? Do let me know. Of course, if you want to support us, if you want to get the Warlock class pin, the Tiernanog, if you want that sort of, you know, get that Irish lore in, and of course the rest of the art set and the sticker, you can check out the Patreon. Truly does help what we're doing. So thanks for watching, and with that, I will see you next time.